She's calm, clever, and never afraid to stand her ground. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett faces a challenge that tests her wit and strength like never before. Watch how she outsmarts a bold opponent, turning every trick against him and proving once again why she's one of the sharpest minds in the room. The hall was buzzing long before anyone stepped onto the stage. People filled every seat, leaning forward as if the night itself held a secret. It wasn't a fancy gala or a political showdown. It was something in between. An open public debate event meant to let people speak openly. No scripts, no filters. That alone made the atmosphere feel charged. Barron, tall and composed, walked in with the air of someone who believed he already understood how the night would go. His suit was sharp, his expression calm, and he gave the crowd a polite nod as he made his way toward the front. He looked comfortable, almost too comfortable, like he expected to take control without breaking a sweat. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett entered quietly, almost unnoticed at first. She didn't push through the crowd or draw attention to herself. She just moved with steady confidence, taking her seat as if the weight of the room didn't faze her. But the people who recognized her knew one thing. Jasmine was not someone you could rattle easily. For several minutes, the event unfolded smoothly. People asked questions, offered thoughts, and the host welcomed each voice. But beneath the ordinary rhythm, there was a tension building, an undercurrent only a few could sense. Barron kept glancing in Jasmine's direction, studying her with a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then the moment came. The host opened the floor again, saying anyone could step up to give their perspective on identity, respect, and public responsibility. Barron moved first smoothly, rising like he had been waiting for this exact invitation. He walked toward the center of the stage with a confidence that caught the audience's attention. His height, his calm movements, everything about him drew eyes naturally. He began speaking about public behavior and how people should present themselves. First, his words sounded neutral. Nothing unusual, nothing sharp. People nodded, listening politely, but then his tone shifted just slightly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet enough that only those paying attention caught the change. He turned toward Jasmine. Not fully, but just enough that everyone knew she was the one he meant. With all the discussions we have about where people come from, he said smoothly, it's interesting how some people claim one thing when their appearance suggests they may have a heritage they don't talk about. The room paused. It wasn't a direct insult, but it was pointed. Too pointed. Barron didn't stop. I've always believed people should be honest about their roots. He added with a seemingly innocent smile. Sometimes you can just see things others try to hide. People shifted in their seats. Some looked at Jasmine. Others looked at Barron with a flash of discomfort. Everyone knew what he was hitting at without him saying it outright. It was a veiled jab at her skin color, an indirect comment dressed as casual observation delivered lightly enough to be denied, yet sharp enough to cut. Jasmine didn't react. Not a flinch, not a raised eyebrow. Nothing. She simply watched him. Her stillness made the moment even more intense. Barron expected at least a small reaction. Surprise, irritation, anything. But her calm expression remained frozen in place, as if his words hadn't reached her at all. And somehow that calm shook the room more than any angry reply could have. The audience felt the tension thickening. A few people whispered to their neighbors. Some stared at Barron with disbelief, while others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to process what they had just heard. The host glanced nervously between the two, sensing the spark that had just been thrown into the open. Barron, however, seemed satisfied with himself. He gave a slow, almost relaxed shrug, as if he had simply made an ordinary comment. Yet his eyes flicked toward Jasmine again, waiting for her to break, to show even a small crack in her composure. But Jasmine continued to sit still, her hands folded neatly, her eyes steady and calm. That silence of hers felt louder than any microphone in the room. After a few moments, Barron stepped back slightly, giving the floor to the next speaker. Though he kept watching Jasmine, expecting something, anything. But she remained quiet. Her silence wasn't fear. It wasn't defeat. It was something else entirely. It was the silence of someone choosing her moment with care. People could feel it. Something in her stillness told the room that her turn, whenever it came, would matter. And so the tension lingered, suspended in the air like a held breath. Barron stood there wearing the faint smile of someone who believed he had come out ahead. The audience waited, wondering if Jasmine had accepted the jab, or if she was planning something. Little did Barron know, the calm he was so proud of would not last. The silence he mistook for hesitation was the exact opposite. Jasmine wasn't shaken. She was ready. She was simply waiting for the right moment to speak. A moment that would shift the entire room. The air felt different after Barron finished speaking. It wasn't loud tension. It was the kind that slips into a room quietly and then refuses to leave. People kept glancing between him and Jasmine, wondering if she was going to answer his indirect jab or if she would let it pass. Her silence made everyone more curious, almost nervous. Barron stood there with an easy smile, the kind of smile someone wears when they believe they've already won. He looked like a person who had just made a clever move in a game and was waiting to see the other player struggle to catch up. Some in the crowd watched him with admiration while others waited uneasily for what might come next. But Jasmine remained as steady as a mountain. She didn't shift. She didn't sigh. She didn't show even the smallest bit of irritation. She simply sat with her hands resting together and her eyes focused straight ahead, not even blinking more than usual. Her calmness confused Barron. He had expected at least some hint that his comment had landed. Maybe a frown, maybe a sharp breath, maybe a subtle shake of the head, but she gave him nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. That silence, her silence, began to work against him. He cleared his throat and tried to continue. I think what I said needed to be said, he added lightly, as if he were trying to convince someone, though no one knew if he meant the audience or himself. People get too sensitive these days. It's important to speak openly. Again, the crowd shifted. They could sense he was trying to keep control, but the room wasn't reacting the way he expected. Instead of agreeing, people seemed to be waiting, almost holding back because Jasmine still hadn't responded. And somehow that made her presence stronger than his words. Barron glanced at her again. She didn't look hurt. She didn't look angry. She simply looked prepared. The host tried to smooth things over by directing the conversation elsewhere. But the moment had already taken root in everyone's minds. The pause after Barron's comment felt like an arrow hanging in the air, waiting to drop, and the person holding the bow hadn't even moved yet. After a few more minutes, Jasmine finally lifted her head slightly and looked directly at Barron. The room hushed instantly, almost as if they all shared one breath. Barron seemed to stiffen, though he tried to hide it by straightening his jacket and offering her a polite nod. But Jasmine didn't nod back. She continued watching him with calm, thoughtful eyes. Then slowly, she rose from her seat. She didn't rush. She didn't jerk her movements or try to make a grand show. Yet the way she stood made the whole room feel like the next moment would matter. Barron's smile faded just a little, the corners of his mouth tightening. Jasmine adjusted her sleeve, still calm, still silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and clear, but there was something underneath it, something controlled, sharp, and intentional. "You're wondering why I've been quiet," she said. She didn't ask. She stated it like she already knew exactly what he'd been thinking. The audience leaned closer. Barron blinked as if her words had hit him before he even understood what they meant. Jasmine continued, "I stayed quiet because I wanted you to finish." Her tone wasn't soft, but it wasn't harsh either. It was the tone of someone who was holding important information and choosing her moment with care. People exchanged looks. Some had already sensed that her silence wasn't passive. It was purposeful. Barron opened his mouth, maybe to interrupt, but Jasmine lifted her hands slightly, not to silence him rudely, but to show she wasn't done speaking. Something in that small gesture made him freeze in place. She said, "You spoke with confidence. You made your point, and you believe you've shaken me." Her words were measured, each one placed carefully. Barron swallowed, unsure where she was leading. "But I didn't remain quiet because I was bothered," she said. "I remained quiet because before I answer you, I want to share something of my own. The crowd reacted quietly. A gasp here, a whisper there. But Jasmine didn't acknowledge the noise. She reached into her bag and brought out a folder, crisp and sealed. The room's attention tightened instantly, as though everyone had been pulled by the same invisible thread. Barron's expression changed. His eyes narrowed slightly, then widened. He glanced at the folder as if it held something dangerous. Jasmine held it in her hand as if it weighed more than paper. "This isn't something I planned to reveal today," she said. "I brought it only in case someone pushed me to a place I don't like going." The implication was clear, and it landed heavily. Barron shifted on his feet. His confidence, once smooth and effortless, now seemed forced. His fingers twitched slightly, betraying nerves he didn't want anyone to see. Jasmine looked him straight in the eye. Not with anger, not with pride, but with a calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "You wanted to talk about identity," she said. "So, let's talk about it fully." The energy in the room thickened. Every person locked onto the two of them. Barron swallowed again, realizing too late that Jasmine's silence had never been a sign of defeat. It was a warning, a quiet signal that the moment she chose to speak, everything would change. And that moment had just arrived. The entire hall seemed to freeze as Jasmine held the sealed folder in her hand. It looked ordinary, just a thin stack of papers inside a plain cover. But the way the room reacted made it feel heavier than steel. Even people in the back row sat completely still, their eyes locked on that folder like it contained something that would shift the ground beneath them. Barron's earlier confidence faded the longer Jasmine stood there without rushing. He had been so sure of himself, so certain he had the upper hand. But now he watched her with unease creeping into his face, like he suddenly realized she had been playing a different game than the one he thought he'd started. Jasmine slowly opened the folder. She didn't rush, and she didn't show any excitement. Her expression remained calm, almost too calm for the moment. The soft rustle of the papers made several people in the audience flinch, as though the sound itself carried a warning. She lifted the first page and held it carefully. The paper wasn't flashy, just structured lines, numbers, and official-looking markings, but its plain appearance only made people more curious. Jasmine looked at Barron and said, "Before you spoke earlier, I had no reason to bring this out. I hoped I wouldn't need to." Her voice was clear, steady, almost gentle, but her words carried weight, the kind that didn't need volume to land hard. Barron clenched his jaw, trying to look unaffected, but the tension around his eyes gave him away. Jasmine continued, "I knew that if anyone tried to make assumptions about me, about my background, my skin, my heritage, I needed to be ready. Not because I'm unsure of who I am, but because some people use identity to cut others down." The audience shifted again. A ripple of agreement passed through the room, mixed with suspense. Barron's earlier jab now felt small compared to whatever Jasmine was building toward. She looked at the page again. "I hired a private investigator months ago, someone who works with ancestry records, genetic mapping, and long-term lineage studies. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't simple, and it took far more time than anyone expected." The crowd leaned closer, drawn deeper into the tension. Barron swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't look ready with a quick remark or a clever grin. His posture stiffened like his body was bracing for something he didn't want to hear. Jasmine took a slow breath. "I didn't do this out of curiosity. I didn't do this to attack anyone. I did this because when people throw personal insults, they usually hope the person being hit has nothing to throw back.